Hello, everyone. It's Aaron Christensen with Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and welcome back to SCARE-A-THON 2025, benefiting the International Rescue Committee. And today we have an awesome special treat. We're going to be chatting with my friend S.A. Bradley of Hellbent for Horror. Let me bring Scott in right now. S.A. Bradley of Hellbent for Horror.
Hi, Aaron, and happy Halloween season. Thanks for having me on.
And to you, I was saying backstage that this is just an opportunity for us to hang out because both of us have been running around like crazy. It's funny, like horror fans, we look forward to Halloween all year, and then suddenly it's like, oh my God, the avalanche just starts pouring downhill on you.
Yeah, it never stops. It's almost like you sacrifice Halloween to the gods so that you can push this thing forward for other people. And put on top of that, I've been moving. So apologies if you see like small box written. I have things on boxes. Literally, I'm in front of the only bookcase that I've got unpacked so far.
Yeah. Scott usually has a much more ornate background. And speaking of which, you were one of the first guests that I had on. I remember back, I think it was SCARE-A-THON 2022, when I was first trying out the whole YouTube thing. And you came on and we did a couple of episodes on different shows. And I think the one we did on the Outwaters may be one of my favorite of those SCARE-A-THON segments, because it was just you and me geeking out for like 45 minutes going, do we like this movie? I don't know if we like this movie. Should anybody like this movie? But yeah, it was super fun. And I just so enjoyed our conversations. You're such a great panelist. I'm thrilled that you're here with me in October of 2025. And I love the fact that we're doing some good for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the key things that I love about this, is that as time has been going on, there's this constant thing that goes with people's expectations and perceptions of horror fans, and a lot of times they love to think that we're just completely about ourselves, or isolationists. We have no empathy, we have no sympathy, and I can't think of anything that's further away from the truth. And what I've been seeing over the years is more people doubling down on that kind of thing, doing like scares that care, taking their time to go out and help other people, put on a movie or something like that, give the proceeds over to others. There are entire conventions now. AuthorCon is completely set up to do nothing more than give money to people who they have like 3 different categories. Somebody who has been horribly burned, a child who is terminal, and a woman who is a single mother who is terminal. They have all these people out there. You'd think it would be easy to pick somebody, but there are so many people that are coming in, and every year they give $10,000 to each person and a van, and that's just coming out of authors, and you never hear about that, right? We have high levels of empathy, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, and you and I had a conversation over the summer talking about this very thing, because you're working on a new book, and then I know there's a chapter kind of dedicated to that idea that horror fans giving back to the community. You and I both kind of come from that place where we were fans, and we're like, I want to do something that actually contributes back to the community. It contributes back to the genre. That's how I came to do my first couple books. That's how you came to write your book.
Yeah, that's the currency that we have. I love to say that I'm completely in love with people who are compelled to create. The people that I get along with the most are people who love horror, but they can't just be takers, right? They can't just be spectators. They have to get in whatever way it is. That their love is so deep that they need to find a way to express it. Doesn't mean that you have to make a movie, but it might be that you make a movie, and maybe the movie's only made for $40. Who knows? It may be that you draw posters. Maybe you make T-shirts. Maybe you write books. Maybe you just put on a podcast, or you just have a party every year. One of the things that I talk about in the book, it's kind of the bookend of the entire book, is when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to go out and trick or treat or anything like that. I was in a deeply religious family, but my dad realized that I just ached for something around Halloween, and it couldn't have been worse, right? I mean, this is a highly demons are everywhere kind of religion. Anything about Halloween you'd think would be the worst possible deal, but he knew that I needed to get a fix of some sort. He wanted to see me happy. So there was one family the Antolics, who are down the street, and they did their house up to the nines, right? They did, there was stuff in every area of their yard. They took half of the side of the house and they made it into a seance. And I would just stand there for probably an hour. My dad would just let me sit there and look all around. And in what that did is they just had this level of kindness. They wanted to give back to something that they absolutely loved. Someone in that family was so excited by Halloween. They said, if I ever get a house, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build something like that. And that's what happened with me. I'm completely unable to express myself in any way. But I said, man, when I get out of this place, if I ever am lucky enough to have a house, I am going to do this. And I did. And for 20, 25 years at my old house, I did that. And when I was moving away, and that's the bookend, is that when I'm moving away, the kids that saw it back 15 years ago were coming by to show me their kids and that they were doing the same thing. And so it's such a weird way to join in community, but it is a way to join into community. And so for me, it's like we need to create, and who knows what it is. And it doesn't even have to be anything huge. It's being positive and wanting to have a way of talking about what we love to someone else. But just, I think we need to talk. We need to communicate more than we are. Bubbles happen when we don't talk, right? And so I think what we do, and it's so silly. Why wouldn't it work, for Christ's sake? If you think about it, a lecture is not going to work, but something that's fun, my goodness. I mean, and there's nothing more fun than Halloween and horror films. Well, I guess maybe some people don't see it that way.
Well, certainly we do. Speaking of creating, I mean, your first book, remind me, did the book come first or was the podcast first?
The podcast came first.
Okay, that's okay. So I knew about the podcast because you had met our mutual friend, John Kitley, at Flashback Weekend here in Chicago. It was a year I did not attend, but I came back. When they came back, they were talking about this guy, Scott Bradley. And I was like, man. So I got to meet you the next year when you came back out again. But tell us a little bit about, the idea of creating the podcast, Hellbent for Horror. When was that? When did you start that?
Sure. That started a little bit after I met John Kitley and a group of folks that I call the Algonquin Round Table of Horror. They were just these guys who were hanging out in the foyer of the convention that you were talking about. And after that weekend, it kind of changed me in a way that I didn't expect. It was something that I was looking for, though. I was working in Silicon Valley in 2016 when I quit to do this stuff and join the circus. But in that time, I had been a person with a gift of gab. So I was working as a recruiter in high tech in startups. And so very high pressure. And I had a passion for it. But what I realized is that I was talking using my voice for other people's passions. I hadn't talked about what I loved for about a decade or so. And I had been a horror fan my whole life, but I had also been in an area where there weren't a lot of people who were horror fans. So I was kind of closeted in that way. I continued to watch the movies, but I wasn't really getting that deeply involved. And then I got kind of depressed around 2015. And my wife said, get the hell out of the house. And she said, you used to love conventions. Why don't you go to a convention? And so she was the one who found Chicago. She just said, here, there's a Halloween reunion. And you love that movie, right? So why don't you go see the 1978 Halloween reunion? And I went on the plane, not knowing anybody, not caring whether I met anybody from Halloween or not. I wanted to have conversations. And so sight unseen, and knew no one. I wasn't sure what I would think of a convention. I kind of felt they were money grabs at a certain point. And I looked around and I realized that the vendors were people that I could talk to a little bit, but they were busy. So I found these weird guys in the foyer of the hotel. I mean, there's all these parties. It's Saturday night. There's parties everywhere. I'm getting invited by some of the vendors. Hey, we're going to have this party in this room. Oh my God, there's noise everywhere. And then there's these guys sitting in the foyer, just took all the chairs, put them together in a circle, boom. And they were just sitting there conspiring until dawn. We talked until dawn. And at that point, I realized I need to talk about this stuff. There are more people than just me out there. And it's not like I have valuable things I had to share. I needed a conversation, and I needed to talk about things that I did love. And I thought that that was probably a good way to get me to meet people that I wanted to meet. And my style was Paul Harvey meets horror. You know, I like this guy, that just told conversational stories, and that here's the rest of the story. Here's what I feel about it. And lo and behold, people were actually listening.
Well, I got to say, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I remember listening to yours and going, okay, that's why I don't do podcasts, is that I couldn't do that podcast. Your podcasts are so high quality. They're so well constructed and conveyed. And then when you do have those conversations, when you do have guests on, you're always asking genuine, intelligent, and inspired questions, things that people aren't normally being asked. And that's one of the things I love about your show, and I love about what you bring as a personality.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's very kind. I also wanted to wax your car a little bit. You've been doing this for a while, and it's wonderful to see how time you put into this. If people knew all the different things that you were doing, they'd be like going, how in the hell? And they're going to. Unfortunately for you, you're in my book. But just if there was one thing that I think is truly inspiring, is one of the smallest things, which is you and John Kitley go to libraries in Chicago and just do free lectures. So you take time out of your busy lives. You're already busy. You're doing these things, which of course have marketing and advertising and all that stuff that's involved with it. You want to be seen in that way. And then there's this thing that no one's going to know about unless they go to the library in Chicago. And you guys are sitting there spending your hard worked time, your free time, to go and talk about horror films with a theme. And you've been doing that for years. And to me, that's the stuff that really builds community.
I thank you. I mean, again, here, let me wax your car back again, because I see a spot. When I was reading your book, Screaming for Pleasure, which I've read numerous times at this point, I always have this moment. I'm like, were we separated at birth? Like how, like there are so many of these experiences that mirror mine in some way or another. And I think you and I have talked about, and I know we've both done it in our various interviews, we're asking people about their horror origins. And I stole your horror corruptor question, like how, like who was the person that got you into this? Let me go ahead and throw those out to you now. Like, what is it that got you into horror? Like what was your gateway?
Oh my goodness. Gateway is an interesting way to put it. Cause I think if you're our age, there was a time when you could not go to R-rated movies, and most of the horror films were R-rated. So it started with, say, your horror host. My horror host was Uncle Ted from Uncle Ted's Ghoul School. But I would almost say that one of the biggest corruptors for people of my age would be the ABC TV movies of the week, which a lot of times are horror movies because they could make them real quick. And so the Night Stalker and stuff like that, they were low wattage, scary stuff, dark shadows. But the thing that got me to where I realized that horror was going to be like an addiction was, oddly enough, not being attended to because my parents were going through a divorce, and I watched a movie I wasn't supposed to watch, which I think is what happens to most of us. Watched a movie called Don't Look Now by Nicholas Roeg that has this opening sequence that is kind of told out of sequence. It's non-linear in its way. It's got 2 or 3 different things that are happening at the same time, and there's just this scary thing about a little girl drowning. And I saw that at the wrong time, and it just knocked me over. And what ended up happening is I had nightmares for 3 days. And after that, I had to see it again. And I did. And then I felt a little bit better. And it was the idea of the first time a movie scares you, it scares you. But after that, it's a thrill. You know what's coming. And then it's like this thing where it actually helps you in a way get over that thing that just scared you so much. It's in a very minor way. But I always say that, if you have horror movies, especially, or books, you can close the book at any time. You can turn it off. You can pause. You can get out of the theater at any point if it's making you too uncomfortable. The world doesn't do that for you. The idea of being able to do that and not do it is getting through the other side of something, whatever that might be. And it can be very, very small, but a lot of little small steps become one big step. And I think I was a very big scaredy cat as a kid. I was afraid of everything. And then as I got deeper into horror, I became less and less scared of things. I mean, there's still stuff that scares the hell out of me, and like aging. that's kind of not the thing that that makes for great. Well, it does. There are great horror movies about that. I've come to believe now that my dad is my first corruptor. I used to say it was my uncle, but my dad, even though he was my judge, jury, and executioner as well, he was also my corruptor, because he allowed me to do certain things. I talk about it in the new thing, and I don't want to continue to pump the book, but it's on my mind right now because I'm just deep in it and the first draft. But I talk about how my dad realized how scared I was of things. So I got this record, and it was Tales to Chill or something like that. It was sound effects on one side and spooky songs on the other. And so he did this thing where he had a mono tape recorder, and he pretended that we were both investigators going into a haunted house. He would needle drop the sounds of chains and stuff like that. And I go, oh, it's very scary. So I'd be holding a microphone saying this stuff. And I'm thinking about how wonderful that was of my dad to do. And I rarely think about that. I'm usually thinking about the confrontations, the things that were not given to me. And it's as I get older, I realize that no, this guy he allowed a lot, whether he wanted it to happen or not, whether he was happy, whether I was a horror fan, he allowed me to be a human being and do it. Might have protested, but in the end, he could have somehow tried to suppress it, and he didn't.
Tell me a little bit about your uncle.
Yeah, my uncle. Well, he was the obvious choice, right? Because my dad was the no guy, but my uncle was the guy who would he was only, I think, 6 years older than me, but that could have been a million years. He was 16 and I was 10, and that's when I was living in that house. And he would just talk about movies that he saw. He's 16. He's a teenager. He's talking about in Psycho, oh my God, mother, blood, blood, blood. And I'm like, what is that he's talking about? And my dad's like kicking him under the table going, dude, what are you doing? And so he would calm down, because my dad was kind of authoritarian folk. And then I'd go up and beg him, tell me what this is all about. So he'd tell me these stories about these movies that he saw. And little did I know, him and my aunt went to see Last House on Dead End Street, but it was called the Fun House at the time.
Wow.
It was in a drive-in. And they told me about this thing. And this was like the holy grail movie for me for years, decades, trying to find this thing, because they just told me about, there was this movie we went to see. Oh my God, it was so sick. They had this woman on a table, they're sawing her legs off, she faints, and they take smelling salts and they're waking her up from smelling salts so they can torture her more. And I'm like, that's the most horrible thing I've ever heard, and I need to see this. And so I had no idea for years and years and years, because they didn't remember the name. They said something about a fun house. I saw the movie The Fun House, the Toby Hooper. Obviously, it's not that. I'm like going, well, is it edited? What the hell? And so I had no idea what it was until I started getting in with people who were trading videos and stuff like that online. And, it took till about online for me to know some of these things. Maybe I saw something in Film Threat, but once there was a dirty dupe of it, then I knew what was going on. But my uncle was great. He was another guy who I had an antagonistic thing. He was old enough that he was kind of teaching me to fight and stuff like that. But he also loved me enough to always talk about this stuff. When
you started the podcast, what was kind of the basic format? Like what was your idea? You said Paul Harvey meets horror. What did you want to get out of that?
I wanted to really just start conversations. I was hoping that people would. I had no idea what podcasting was in the first place. It's just the cheapest thing that I could do. I wasn't going to be making a movie. I wasn't going to be, who has time to write? Ha ha. But I just asked around what podcasting was, and people said, well, it's kind of like the Wild West. You can do anything that you want. And it was like on demand. Somebody told me it was on demand radio. And I was like, that's a kind of interesting thing. So I just wanted to get some stuff out. And I wanted to see if there were people that were just like me. So I wanted to do essays. And so the very beginning of it was me putting down an origin story. I was like, how do you start this thing? And it's like, well, I guess I'll start by talking about what I want to know from other people, and I'll show mine first and see if they show theirs. And it was essentially the first kiss, the idea of what was your first kiss with horror? What was the first movie that you saw that was yours? Not something that was like, I talk about court appointed horror, which is like if your parents monitor what you do, okay, you can watch this one, but you can't watch this. It's the one that's forbidden. It's the first one that you go past the edge of the forest and you go and you get bit. And it's this, whatever that movie is, it makes you a fan for life. And so I talked about Don't Look Now, which I just mentioned. And then I asked people, hey, get in touch with me and tell me what your first kiss was. And it took a little bit of time. First, there was nothing. It was just an echo chamber. And then people started to email me. And they were just like, here's The Fog was the first movie that got me. You're going to laugh, but it was child's play. You're going to laugh, and it's always, you're going to laugh. You're going to think this is silly. And I'm like, no, this makes all the sense in the world. These are the movies that you were connected to at that time. How old were you? You know, it's another question. It's not, what was your first Corruptor and how old were you? It's almost always 8 to 12. Somewhere in that range is when we decide, I need to try this for myself. You know, I need to, thanks for all the guardrails, folks, taking care of me all this time, but it's time to walk on my own. And then, you know, horror is just this wonderful metaphor for the challenges in life. It's this place that's safe, a safe handshake that you can have with your shadow. It's a safe handshake with the way that the world's going to be scary for you. And it's all in a wonderful little hour-and-a-half package. And you can go right to that and not be subtle about it. But it's changed in how it's gotten so broad in its appeal with people that I think the thing that amazes me is that, you know, I assume I'm talking into a tube and no one's listening. That's the essential. Nobody's there to help. Nobody. I in the beginning I had my wife helping, but she got too busy. So it's just me doing this whole damn thing. Social media was still relatively, you know, naive. So Twitter really helped. It was like I put stuff out on Twitter and people were like, wow, that kind of looks kind of interesting. Now everything's so bubbled and everything. I don't even know if you could do it, but I had this huge surge and I started getting people writing me, telling me about their stuff. And then I would go places and people wanted to know more. So it went from a podcast to a book. And then it went from a book to lectures. Then it went to from lectures to panels. So I've been doing a lot of panels at horror conventions. I do a lot of book conventions. So I meet other authors, which has, I don't really advertise it much, but I've been in a bunch of anthologies, horror anthology books. So short stories. I've started writing short stories. So I've gone more into fiction as well as nonfiction. I've gotten people who want to be interviewed on my shows, which is nice. But a lot of it has stayed pretty, the heart of it is still the same. You know, the heart of it is still, let's hear what you have to say. I want to have a conversation and tell me a little bit about what excites you about horror. If anything, maybe I'm more looking at how culture affects horror and how horror affects culture. If you want to find out what's freaking people out or pissing people off at any given time, look at the exploitation films. Look at the horror films that played the second bill at a drive-in, not the first bill. Don't go to the prestige films. Oh, The Exorcist The Exorcist will tell you something. But look at Ruby. Look at movies that are like the throw-offs of those and see what their villains look like. And why is this so important? Why are these movies that need to pull the dollar from you? Those are the movies that speak the most to what is really raw and visceral happening in the culture, because they need to piss you off. They need to get you crazy. So you can go all the way back to The Silence and see, you know, about the white slavery films and stuff like that. And, you know, there never was any white slavery, but you'd be damned hard to prove that by all the movies that there were at that time. And so it doesn't mean that we're going to see nice things about us, but horror is always talking about what we're truly thinking.
You went from the podcast, and then what drew you to write your first book, Screaming for Pleasure? People
were asking, or just the weird thing. I mean, there was people were like, why don't you write a book? Because they were going, you know, you're writing these essays, and how long are those? I said, oh, they're each one's about 6,000 words. And like, 6,000 words? I'm like, going, are you insane? And like, obviously, and you've been listening. But it was also just this thing of, the book will help the podcast will help the book, and so getting out into different places. Not everybody's a podcast listener. And so I was going, perhaps there's something to be said about the things that I'm talking about, putting them into a book. And now not that many people read books. One of the weird things about moving, we're trying to get more bookcases, and it's hard to find bookcases. They're like, oh, people don't buy those anymore, so they're not really getting made that much. We have to special order them. I'm like, you're kidding me. Wow. It's like, yeah, physical media of all sorts is kind of dwindling. So I'll be leaving this mortal plane at just the right time. But yeah, the book was one of those things. It felt like a challenge. I always loved books, as I can't necessarily tell here, but that was kind of like a high water thing. Books saved me. Again, horror movies, R-rated movies, wasn't seeing those when I was young, but I could go to the library, and the library liberated me a lot because my dad didn't believe that books were full of nasty, horrible things. He thought they were all homework. And so books saved me and liberated me as well. A very quiet revolution. And so why wouldn't I want to be part of that revolution for somebody else?
And you have a new book coming up. I know you've talked about working. What is going to be this? How is this book going to be different from the first one?
Well, it's called Defenders of the Faith, How Horror is Going to Save Your Soul. And this one's more about why we love horror and why this creates community, and how we find ourselves in this outsider world, and how it's open for everybody. And I wanted to try and make a point that it's not always about gatekeeping. The fandom is not always about gatekeeping, and that there are people who are not that way out there, but also, talk a little bit to that. So the book is really broken down into, it's going to drive some people a little bit crazy. I call horror the punk rock of cinema. Most people will look at it as heavy metal, right? And I love heavy metal. I've been a metalhead long before I was a punk rocker, but I became a punk rocker like 19, 20 years old as well. Those two worlds should not mix, but they did. And the reason is that horror lends itself more to the do-it-yourself kind of world of punk rock, that there's no stage really between the audience and the performer. And the performer may be the audience member today, maybe the performer of tomorrow. It's regional. It can survive on the smallest of budgets. It's always about the outsider, and it's not about power. It's more about finding friendships. And sometimes with heavy metal has a grandiosity to it, which can be a lot of fun. And it's the obvious thing when you're talking about horror, because there's so much devil stuff. But there's a ton of that in punk as well. But the difference is that if you go see Dio, well, he's long dead. Let's say Metallica, the closest thing to like punk was the thrash metal movement, where they started saying posers, 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 because they were tired of the idea of the pageantry that was going on when metal was getting so big. And the thing is, all those bands were on a 20-foot stage way above you. There's a huge difference between you and the virtuoso guitarist. All of those things are separate, right? You love the stories of heavy metal, but you may not think you could ever be a heavy metal guy. And yet there's these guys in punk who they may not necessarily know how to play, but by God, they're going to learn on the job. And then I think of guys like Bill Rebane and stuff like that. All of these horror guys are just like, I'm going to fucking do this thing. I don't need film school. What are you talking about? And that's going to look just fine if I just put that in the movie. Who cares? That kind of thing is what you see in punk rock. That's the freedom spirit. So because of that, I have a lot of the book kind of framed in that kind of thing. But it's talking about how we need communication. I talk about the fine art, the lost art of shooting the shit. That really, if you're looking at how art movements happen, they don't happen because people sit around and have a master class and say, here, what are we going to have as a setup thing for our movement? No, the movement comes because everybody's hanging out busting each other's balls, talking about what they love, laughing, joking, spending hours together, relaxing. It's amazing how much spirited discovery happens when you're just not thinking about spirited discovery. When you take the chains of, oh, I must do this off, and you're just having fun. The sense of play is what matters. So I talk about that kind of thing. I talk about sacred places because I'm talking about things like Cinema Wasteland. And so Cinema Wasteland is this thing that if you tried to describe it to people who are just regular fans, it'd be like, why would you go there? You're going where? Cleveland? You're not even going to Cleveland. You're going to the woods outside of Cleveland. I see. And, you're going to go see people I've never heard of. Well, yeah, it's a sacred place, and sacred places don't get planned in advance. They find us and we find them, and then they become something because of us. The thing that we really care about is the conversation and the connection that we have. And so the book is a lot about all of these different things that I see that are involved in horror and in music, and how there's a similarity between those, and even a little bit of comedy. Horror, why do I give horror recommendations to people? It's kind of like getting a joke told to you. That's great. I just had a great joke told to me. I laugh. Now what? Well, it's dead unless I give it away. I have to give it to someone else, and then I have to see their joy in the surprise of that joke. And then they'll give it away, and it continues on. It's a communal thing. That's a difference for me between fans and collectors. Some of my friends are fans and collectors, but I don't have too many collector friends, because collectors are a little bit more solitary. People who are fans can't wait to give something to somebody else, can't wait to inform them of something that they've got. And collectors are about, hey, they love it, but they want it for themselves. And for me, I'm more interested in the person who wants to, share their lunch with you.
This is why I love having these conversations, is that we get to have the exchange back and forth. And speaking of giving, give us a little recommendation. Like, what are some of the movies that get you into the October mood for Halloween, for our spooky season?
Oh, wonderful. Well, a lot of these are going to be the classics, right? I always leave room for the new ones that blow me away. And there's been a few of those. If I was going to say anything that was new recently that I was like, wow, I would have never thought that this would impress me, was Weapons. I thought that was really impressive in its way. But if I'm looking at the stuff that gets me all going, I have to start where the modern wow for me happened. That's Halloween. As dusty as it is, 1978's Halloween gets watched, but less of that. I kind of work through that one. I sit there and I go, there it is, my old friend, and I pet it and everything like that. But I really I love watching The Lady in White is one that I absolutely love, because it gives me the Halloween feel. I love movies that make me feel as if I'm around that Halloween season. Another one, and I watch it. It's the last movie that I watch on Halloween every year, and it's Phantasm. That's my end. I love the way that movie ends. I love the way that it feels. It feels like Halloween whenever I watch it.
The episode that we did on Phantasm is also one of my favorites, because that was one of those times where I had like a aha moment about a movie that I've seen dozens and dozens of times, and suddenly you hear it through somebody else's lens, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of that movie this way before. We just had that recently happen with the Bride of Frankenstein and Werewolf of London episode, where I was like, I've seen these movies so many times, and suddenly somebody offers something. I'm like, I never thought of that. And I wouldn't have thought you could tell me something new about Bride of Frankenstein that I hadn't read or thought myself. And so yes, thank you again for the Phantasm panel, because that was super fun.
Oh yeah, that was great. And I've seen that kind of, people are starting to get into the idea of him as being death and stuff. I'm seeing a lot more about that online. Other ones, I would say, I love a good haunted house one. So it's either The Haunting, the original one, in that beautiful black and white, or The Changeling, which is another one that I really love, that ghost story that's there. And it creeps me out. I kind of like the chills. I would go with Insidious, the original Insidious. I think James Wan does not get enough credit for his first movies, his sequels and stuff, but he comes up with original ideas that are really good. And Insidious is the one that I think just really hits home. I love the Blob. I love the remake of the Blob. I love the original Blob too, but there's something about the remake of the Blob that feels very Halloween-y. There's that whole thing of like the snow is coming, you know, there's this whole bit. And Trick or Treat. I never know how to say that.
The Michael Dougherty film.
Yeah, the Michael Dougherty, because it feels very much like Halloween. I love how they just hit on that thing. So if I'm looking at Halloween, the Halloween season is full of all sorts of things. And I go from some of the darkest of the dark to like, I'm going to watch Trouble Every Day. That's not one that you can just recommend to anybody. But, you know, that's going to be in my Halloween oeuvre. But from that to the silliest thing, watching Charlie Brown, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown is another tradition of mine. But the whole month is not only watching these things and enjoying them, it's talking to friends about them, but also putting up Halloween decorations. And even though I've moved, I've got a couple up already.
Awesome. That's great. Scott, thank you so much for coming out. This is, again, SCARE-A-THON 2025, benefiting the International Rescue Committee. All of our funds from all of our panels are going to be going directly to these folks. They've been working for over 100 years, providing help around the world, over 40 different countries, providing help for those who need help. If you look down below in the description of this video, you'll find the link to the donation platform. Please give and give generously. We're heading to the back part of October. Now's the time to make your pledge. Scott, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to reading your new book, checking out your new podcast episodes, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me. This is great. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.